All right, welcome back. So just wrapped up day 2. I'm a bit blasted. It was a long day. So just to do a quick recap before we get into the details of the route today, we basically started in Glenwood. Again, if you're going to do the route, there really isn't much in Gypsum. So the extra 10 miles or 15 miles into Glenwood, I think is definitely a benefit. We started in Glenwood, had a good breakfast in Glenwood. We were on the bikes at 7:30, probably done with breakfast by like 9. So we were probably on the road by like 9:15, 9:30. And then we basically went from Gypsum to Buena Vista. And we went up the kind of the crown jewel of this section of the BDR would be Hagerman Pass. And the entrance to Hagerman, it looks way more difficult than what it is. GoPro doesn't really do it justice, so you kind of see it and you're like, oh, it looks a little rocky, but it's not bad. When you get there, like, it does look far more intimidating than it looks on video. So the GoPro effect is real. GoPro should coin that term, and they probably do, because their name's in it. Anyways, yeah. So and then Hagerman Pass, and then you drop down into Leadville, and then we had lunch in Leadville, and then from Leadville you kind of cruise up and over Weston Pass. Not my favorite pass, if I'm honest. The road's on the backside because we're doing north to south, so like if you're doing it the traditional way, south to north, that kind of east side of Weston Pass, super fun. I mean, we were ripping like 55 miles an hour down those dirt roads. I mean, we were just ripping today, so that was fun. And then you kind of come through the Buena Vista 4-mile HOV area. Totally worth it. I was tired because at this point we got there at like probably 5 o'clock. It's now 6 o'clock, so we probably got there at like 4:30. And it's not that far, and it's this cool, like fun, like HOV park that you go through. Totally worth it. We were thinking about skipping it because we got out of Leadville way too late. But I'm glad we didn't. It was definitely worth it. I wish I had more energy and I had more water because at that point I was just blasted. So, but it was totally worth it. Really fun. And now we're staying in Buena Vista. We have a rest day tomorrow, almost like the Tour de France. So if you're a cyclist, tomorrow's our rest day. So we're actually, which I'm kind of nice because I rode hard today. And what I mean by I rode hard is like I've never ridden the Tiger 900 this hard today. I pushed that bike hard. And one thing that I learned, this may be completely obvious for all of you experienced riders, but for somebody who's new like me, there's 2 modes on the Tiger. There's off-road mode and then there's off-road pro mode. Off-road mode still has traction control, and you think, oh, there's an off-road version of traction control. That's going to help me maintain traction and help me be faster and keep traction, right? It's all about keeping traction, because if you have no traction, then you wreck. However, I think that on day 1, it was the off-road mode traction control that was messing me up, because one quick note, this is a little bit of a side rant, but also important. On the BDRs, especially so far, the 2 sections we've done, totally big bike friendly. If you want to ride a full-size adventure bike, because most of the time you're on dirt roads, and there is a decent amount of road highway miles, like connectors between each kind of dirt road. You know, up and over Hagerman, it is more technical, but you could easily pick your way through that and just kind of go slow through that stuff. But on the way up, you would rip. Like if you had a KTM 1290 Adventure R, like you could rip up the upside. I'm slower down, but you know, through the chunky stuff, you could pick your way through. So now that we've got that out of the way, with most of the BDR being dirt country roads that you would drive like a Subaru down, right? There's a lot of, it's very hard, and then, you know, very hard packed dirt with like gravel on top, and so traction is very limited. When I ride the Honda, so when I ride the CRF 450 on that stuff, there's no traction control. It's basically just gas, and there is a map, right? I can change the engine mapping, but there's no traction control. There's nothing. It's just throttle and tires. And that, I was like, why can't I rip on that bike? And I struggled so bad yesterday. So today I was ripping, and I switched the bike to off-road pro mode, which turns all of that stuff off. So no ABS, no traction control, and it was so much better. I could actually ride the Triumph like I could ride the Honda. This may seem completely obvious, and like when I got to the bottom and I was like, oh, so much fun, and I was like talking to the 2 guys who are leading the ride, who are super experienced riders. They've pretty much done every BDR. They're like, oh yeah, if every bike I get, it's the first thing I do, I just turn all of that stuff off. So it may seem obvious to an experienced rider, but to somebody who's new, you may be like me thinking that it is to your advantage to have these traction control modes on. once I turned it off, so much better. You know, sitting up tight on the tank like a dirt bike, ripping around corners. I mean, it just made, you know, coming in and like, you feel the bike slide, right? You still slide, but when it cuts the power to the rear wheel, you don't feel the traction. So like you're sliding, but you still have grip, and then it'll reconnect and then you can hook out, right? When it cuts the power, the bike just feels like you're just gonna drop it. It just feels like it's gonna wash out. And so today, so much more fun. Like some of the road, like before we got the first kind of dirt road section that you do before you head over towards Hagerman. So basically from Gypsum over to this backcountry highway. I don't know, I'll have to look on the map, but essentially from there, like we were just ripping, and it was so fun. I've never ridden the Tiger that hard today. I feel bad, like I feel like just got abused today, but I pushed that bike hard, maybe not to its limits because I'm not that good of a rider, but for some other guys who are really good at riding, you know, they could probably push it hard about it. For me, that's the hardest I've pushed that bike, and I've had so much fun, and it was just really a great day, a really long day. We didn't get here, you know, we were on the bikes at 7:30 to go get breakfast, and we didn't get to the hotel until probably 5:30. So just a long day out and in the sun. However, it was awesome. So with that being said, now let's get into the details of the route. If you're interested in the route, the perspective of the route from today, from a beginner's perspective. And so with that, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment below. What are your thoughts on this modern traction control junk? And then with that, let's get into the route. Okay, let's go over the Colorado BDR route, day 2 number route. Technically this would be 3 if you started up north in Braggs and then you went to Steamboat and then down into Eagle/Gypsum. Quick note, as I mentioned earlier, we did start in Glenwood Springs. So here you can see we're kind of cruising out of the town of Glenwood Springs. It's a nice little town. I included some shots of the canyon because if you haven't driven Glenwood Canyon, I think it's definitely worth it. It is, if you're trying to avoid highway miles at all costs, then yeah, by all means skip it. But I do think it is definitely worth it. It is a beautiful canyon, definitely worth the 10 miles. Most people that have ridden it, you know, end up loving it, so I would recommend it. Then you get off at Gypsum and you start heading basically kind of southwest, or southeast, sorry, southeast. Let's take that back, not southwest. And the dirt roads there are pretty fast actually. So you're kind of cruising through national forest, and the first road it's just a lot of, again, it's back to my point in video number 1 where it's just a lot of loose gravel. So, you know, we're holding like 40, 45 miles an hour through here, and it just kind of winds and follows this creek. We did stop at a campground for a couple minutes to use the bathrooms and stuff because it took about an hour to get up there. And basically, you're making your way towards Sylvan Lake, which is a really popular area just outside of Eagle, Colorado, to go camping, and it's a state park. And generally, the campground sells out really fast. If you're thinking about camping there on doing the Colorado BDR, like, you better plan ahead because it takes a lot to get a spot there. And then we hook a left. So Hardscrabble Road keeps going straight, which will take you out to another lake, but then you kind of hook a left. And on this road is where everything really kind of changed as far as the road goes. So we went from like this fast, wide, open road with just kind of loose gravel, basically what we had seen most of the day on the first day, to kind of more of a narrow road. A lot of rain ruts in this road, kind of had to ride in the middle to ride through it. And as you can see, it was super dusty. So that's another thing when you're riding with 12 guys, even if you're going to ride with 2 or 3 guys and you're going to be towards the back, like, I tried to space myself out. So I tried, if I was anywhere in the middle of the pack and not at the front, even if I was at the front, I tried to let the person in front of me get maybe 1/10 of a mile up the road, because by the time they get up that far up the road, the dust will cut down. But basically the road conditions stay like this for quite a while. So it's rutted and kind of rocky and rough. Now they do kind of maintain these roads, so it may change. Then you feel like you're kind of making your way up a pass, but you never really go over any passes. Here you kind of climb up the side of the hill. Just a lot of big, loose rock. And then it starts to get more and more embedded rock in the road. So it goes from this kind of smooth, fast, flowy road to kind of a narrow 1-lane road.
with a lot of embedded rock in it. And for me, it was just way easier to try to keep your speed up, to keep the bike smoother through a lot of those embedded rock sections. And most of this section, until you cut off and actually start heading towards, actually, I take that back. In this section, it stays pretty embedded rock all the way up and over Hagerman Pass. So as you're riding, it kind of, once you hit this section of Hardscrabble Road, it's kind of this style terrain for most of the ride up and over Hagerman Pass, where it's just a lot of, it's very kind of, it's decently fast. So the faster you go, it kind of smooths out terrain. If you're on a KTM with like the good WP Explorer suspension, you should be able to rip through here and kind of smooth the trail out because it can handle the harder hits. I'm not going to lie, the Showa suspension on the Tiger and with that steeper rake. So the rake on the Tiger 900 Rally Pro Argon Edition is like 24 degrees. The KTMs are closer to like 26 degrees. And so basically that means the front wheels just pushed out more. If you're new and you don't mountain bike and you're not familiar with like head tube angle and that sort of thing, it just makes the bike handle the rough stuff better. So it just makes it track a little better. There is a short section where the road does kind of smooth out and get a little bit faster as you actually get closer to Sylvan Lake. And actually, I thought we were getting really close to Hagerman Pass because I kind of felt like we kept climbing up and up and up. And the road actually there was really, really fun. It was fast, fun. It was probably my favorite section. And as you can see here, we're kind of now cruising next to Sylvan Lake. So this is a super popular camping area. If you think you're going to camp here in the winter, or not in the winter, but for your BDR, I would book it as soon as it becomes available. I think you can do it through like recreation.gov, but I would get a campsite as soon as possible because it fills up every year. But these roads from Sylvan Lake over to the main highway before we headed over towards Hagerman Pass was actually some of my favorite sections of the entire BDR. The Tiger, I feel, was just meant for these roads. It has a more kind of road-oriented geometry, as I just mentioned, and so it really just, in these fast, flowy dirt roads, was amazing. And having turned the bike into off-road pro mode, it handled so much better. You could kind of like slide the bike out around corners, under control, within reason, always riding at 80%, right? Never crossing that 100% limit, always riding within your limits. But it was just really fast and fun. And actually we were riding with another guy, Dwight, and he was ripping too. We actually got to a section where he came up over the hill and the road wide, and I just saw his brake lights come on again because I was keeping distance because I didn't want to get dusted to death. And I saw his brake lights come on and I was like, oh, what happened there? But basically you come out and then you hit a main highway, which will actually you can kind of cut over. So you can go towards Basalt and the Aspen area. So this will take you back towards Aspen, which eventually you could cut the highway back to Glenwood Springs. And it's just a short paved section, not very far, but it's a nice 2-lane road kind of whipping through the trees. So if you kind of want to de-dust for a second, open your visor, get some fresh air going, this is a nice section. Fun, flowy, fast, and then you're right back on the dirt. And the dirt pretty much immediately goes back to Hardscrabble Road style dirt, where it is a lot of embedded rock and it's kind of fast. So it's like, it's weird because you have to go slow enough because you don't want to like hit a big pothole or big rock and flat or wreck your bike, but you need to go fast enough to kind of smooth the road out. So it's kind of an interesting mixture. And it is this way all the way up to the entrance of Hagerman. And the Hagerman entrance is where a lot of people get hung up, and a lot of people talk about it being like one of the more difficult parts of the Colorado BDR. Honestly, for me, if you're doing the traditional route, you'll come down it and so it won't be that bad. And going up it, honestly, I took the line on the left and it wasn't so bad. You'll see here in a moment that if you think like a mountain bike, generally bigger rocks are just going to kind of roll over. And so when we got to the Hagerman entrance, we all stopped, and then I looked at the line, and here on the left you can see it's pretty smooth. There's this big rock that scares everybody, but it just rolls, and you roll right over it, and then it's real chunky. But this chunk actually doesn't hold for very long. And I actually made a mistake. I thought I recorded the rest of the climb up, but I actually stopped the camera instead of like recording video. Because you can see here I hiked back down and I was taking pictures of people going through the water feature. And so I thought I had my camera on going through this kind of creek crossing, and I didn't, but I took a bunch of pictures. Here's some cool images of people going through that creek crossing. And then, yeah, forgot to video the up to the top of Hagerman Summit. Again, same thing. It's a lot of big embedded rock, kind of technical going up, but you can really kind of rip. I had a lot of fun actually climbing Hagerman. I think it was probably my favorite pass. It's enough like technical difficulty. It's not super steep. Like as we start to look at the way down here, it's not super steep that like you're constantly riding the brakes and you like it's hard to maintain your speed going down. Like some sections we hit in the San Juan Mountains and like the Alpine Loop area, still very rocky. So it's like technical. So you're picking your way through, kind of slow, kind of fast. It's a good mixture. And actually, this section here, looking at it now, I'm like, oh, it looks really scary because it kind of drops off on both sides. But actually, it wasn't anything at all. It was just kind of loose rock, but it wasn't super steep. So it was easy to maintain like 10, 11 miles an hour, keep your speed up through that loose stuff so your front wheel doesn't wash out, and you can kind of keep cruising through. The entire back side section of Hagerman, again, is like this. Lots of just big embedded rock, pretty much all the way down. And this actually was really fun for me. I really enjoyed it. I think for me, Hagerman Pass was probably my favorite pass of the entire ride. I kind of like this technical big rock stuff, but not super steep. And the problem with the San Juan Alpine Loop section is you get a lot of this, but it's very steep and very big consequence. And even here where the road kind of drops off to the left, it was easy enough and kind of flat enough to where you could easy to maintain the right amount of speed. So one thing I need to practice a lot on after doing the Colorado BDR is very steep, loose, rocky descents. I mentioned earlier in preparing that I felt that descents were my kind of weak spot. Again, going through those sections in the San Juans where it gets it's the same loose and steep like we see here on the backside of Hagerman with these big drop-offs, but far steeper. It just adds a whole other element. And really being able to know like how hard you can ride that front brake, because most of your stopping power comes when the front brake, and most bikes you're probably gonna have two rotors up front, so most of your stopping power, even on a mountain bike, it's like 75% of your stopping power is the front brake. But when you're going through technical stuff like this, if you put too much brake, it pulls all the traction out and the wheel wash out, and then you'll go down. So something I definitely need to work on. Hagerman is actually, I feel like, a great place to practice at because, again, not very steep, really easy to build confidence. And if you could rip through here and get an idea of like how hard you can stop the bike and how quickly you can, when you get to the steeper stuff in the San Juan area, it will make your life a whole lot easier. And then once you're about, I don't know, half the way down, the trail actually starts to smooth out and it's pretty fast at this point. I mean, as you can see, we're almost going 30 miles an hour and you kind of reach the big parking lot. And then this dirt road that you hit here, from here all the way to Leadville, it's fast. It is a big, wide, 2-lane, decently flat road, not really any sharp corners. I think there's a couple, but nothing that really stuck out, nothing that was too challenging. And so you can go pretty fast through here, which was fun because I feel like the bike was meant for this. And as you can tell here, and you can see my setup that I had talked about, I had strapped this old like low pro hip pack. So it's like a camera back that I carried all my camera gear in and like all the essentials I needed for the day. It straps to the rear of the bike really well. The camelback piece of it, the hose was hanging out. I lost a little mouthpiece, so in like a lot of camelbacks you can like stick this mouthpiece thing and bite down and then suck. That came off, which kind of sucked because this was like right 2 days in, technically 3 days, but 2 days in the actual dirt sections, and I lost that for the rest of the trip. However, it still had the open and close valve, like where you can turn it off, and so it still worked. But I did lose all my water as well, which we'll get to later because later in the ride, this was a big day, really long day. Mostly because lunch in Leadville took forever. The service was absolutely terrible. Don't even get me started. I'm not even gonna mention the restaurant, but the service was just terrible. So that took a while. We were in Leadville for way too long. But as you can see here, we actually cruised into the town. So if you're going to skip lunch in Leadville, you would actually turn right and instead of turning left to go into Leadville, and then you just catch the trail a little bit further down the road as you head into Buena Vista. Actually, you go up and over Weston Pass. So yeah, you can see here now we're kind of making our way back after stopping for lunch. Again, kind of this easy, it's like a neighborhood road, so you got to kind of like be a little easy with your speed, but you're pretty much right back on the dirt. So if you do go to downtown Leadville, it is probably a 5 to 10 minute ride from downtown Leadville before you're back on the dirt. Now, I will say of all the passes, even the really difficult ones that we rode in the San Juan Mountains, which are the southern mountains in Colorado, Weston Pass was my least favorite. The others were really hard and they have some challenges, and it encourages me to get better, especially in some of my weak points and riding those more challenging passes. So those ones weren't my least favorite because they were outside of my like relative skill level. Because it pushes me, it makes me want to get better. Where this was just a lot of small, sharp, square-edged, embedded rock. So it's not loose, but it's just, you kind of have to pick your way through because you don't want to flat. Like flatting on a BDR would be awful, especially if you pinch flat because you're not running hard enough pressure. So on that point, I rode a little bit harder tire pressure than I think the bike recommends. I think most people running like 35. I was running 36 in the front and 40 in the rear. Now the back tire on the tire is only a 17, it's not an 18. So that's another thing to consider. Most more off-road adventure bikes are going to have a bigger rear wheel, which will help you get over this stuff easier. So if you're familiar with mountain biking, I'll use that because it just makes more sense. Like 29ers pretty much dominate because it's a 29-inch wheel versus the original 26. So it's 3 inches bigger, and it just basically rolls over those big obstacles so much easier. But I will say that like cruising up to the top of Weston Pass, it's really pretty. I've never been up there before, which was cool. There's one neat thing about the Colorado BDR is like I've grown up in Colorado, I've lived in Colorado my whole life, and we went to a lot of places I've never been before. Especially when you get on these backcountry roads, like there's really no excuse to go back there unless you're doing a BDR or maybe you live in that area or you're intentionally seeking out some of these spots. Weston Pass from a view standpoint is really pretty, and it kind of separates Leadville and the Buena Vista Valley area from the like Fairplay Valley. So it's just kind of like range of mountains that separate these two big valleys. And Fairplay is where South Park is. If you've seen like the South Park cartoon, the little town of South Park is on this other side. And so you go up and over Weston Pass, and then you drop down into the Fairplay area, which is South Park there. You're not very close to Fairplay and South Park, so I don't think it would be a good detour if you're thinking about like, oh, maybe we can go check out the original town of South Park. I'm not sure it would be worth it. But then the roads going down Weston Pass were awesome. So these roads were really fast as well. The one thing to note is like as you first start going down is that there's a lot of like potholes where it has rained and water has collected, and then it kind of creates these like dry mud puddles essentially. So they're kind of deep. Depending upon the size of them, if you're holding a decent speed, if you throttle blip, that was one thing I was practicing a lot on this trip is like, as I was coming up to these kinds of obstacles, like throttle blipping over these little potholes to kind of skip over them, and as opposed to getting the front wheel in them. And it's something I tried to practice a lot more throughout the entire trip, or even big rocks, like just kind of throttle blipping over big rocks. And then you hit Highway 285. So this is a major highway that kind of cuts diagonally from Denver all the way down to New Mexico, and it kind of runs this weird diagonal south pattern, but it is a very busy highway. So this is kind of the first major highway where you might see a lot of traffic. You don't have to go very far before maybe 3 or 4 miles before you're kind of back up towards the top of the pass on the roadside, and you hit the 4-mile HOV area. So this is right outside of the town of Buena Vista, and this area was super fun. So I included a lot of clips from this section because I think it is definitely worth it. While this day was really long and it was hot and I was out of water, I think as I mentioned earlier in the kind of day summary, I wish I had been fresh for this section because it was a lot of fun. And it's an area that is meant for side-by-sides and dirt bikes. It's kind of just a play area right outside the town of Buena Vista, and it was super fun. And it's just this single track that kind of loops through the hills here up and over like Weston Pass essentially. So you're just a little bit further south on Weston Pass, but it's not technically Weston Pass, if that makes sense. It's like the same mountain range, just a little bit further south. And as you can see here, like there's some cool like technical rocks you can roll through. The dirt is actually really dusty, but it was soft yet hard, if that makes sense. So it wasn't like super sandy where you were constantly fighting it, but it was kind of soft and controlled. This area here is like a creek crossing. If you come to this, I would recommend going kind of around it. Like you can see here, we're kind of cutting through, because what has happened is we heard a lot of bikes were basically drowning out in this section because the side-by-sides will go in there, the back end will sink, they get stuck, and then they're kind of digging holes to get out. So there's kind of this cut through. So if you see this cut through, I definitely would take it. We heard actually a couple of guys talking about bikes drowning here, and that basically will ruin your trip if you waterlog your bike. Also, a note if I forget, in the Tin Cup area as we are heading from Lake City towards Telluride, there's a traditional creek crossing there. Same thing. A lot of side-by-sides have dug out the exit to it, and so it has buried a couple of bikes and basically ruined guys' trips. So this one in the HOV area I would skip, and I would also skip the one in Tin Cup area if you're going to do the BDR, at least as of right now. I don't know that it's going to get better. I don't know if anybody's going to backfill them, so I would skip them. Now there is another little creek crossing in this area, and we'll see it comes up shortly, which is kind of funny actually, so we'll get to that. So if you're doing it the traditional way and you're going south to north, this would be the second creek crossing, not the first one. But again, this area is just super fun, and you can see the guy in front of me. He's on a big 1250 GS, I mean, even with luggage, and you see the thing bouncing around, but he really enjoyed it. And actually, the guys on the GSs were like, yeah, our bikes definitely weren't made for this area, but it was a lot of fun. I actually would like, there's a cool campground, RV campground. You can also do tents or rent yurts. It's right at the base of this trail. I would like to stay there and bring my Honda 450 and just go spend some time in this area because it was really fun. Again, super dusty. You can even kind of tell the camera here with the sun is a bit dusted out from all the dust today. And I'm going to do a kind of an essential gear item list that not a lot of people talk about. I have little things that I end up kind of buying along the way at different stores, so you could potentially pack them and make your life way easier. And I'll go through that list. And it's really all about dust management, I think, is kind of the bigger piece of it. But again, this area is so fun. If I could, actually it probably would be great if you're doing south to north, because you would go through this first. So you'd start in Buena Vista, and this would be the first area you go through. And so you'd be fresh, so you could have a lot of fun ripping your bike through here, making sure you're not getting waterlogged or waterlogging your bike in that second creek crossing. Here's a little like deep sand area. If you watch the Colorado BDR video about the BDR, you see the guys going through this, and it was way deep. Actually, when we went through it, I barely even noticed. I was like, oh yeah, where was that sand section? You can see it's a little bit deeper here, but it really was nothing at all. I mean, I held 30 miles an hour through there, so it wasn't bad at all. And here is where we can see the first or second creek crossing, depending where you're going. Second for me, came in, tried to stay left, went way too left, and ended up in the bush. And then you can tell Mike on his GS kind of then rips by me, and I kind of got stuck in there. A couple guys actually passed me as I was trying to get unstuck, and I didn't want to, like, because it was in a blind corner, I didn't want to get in the way of them trying to get out. And yeah, so, but no damage to the bike, just kind of ran up in the bush there. And then once you hit the main highway here, you're pretty much in the town of Buena Vista. So to get here, you actually kind of then cut through the main downtown area. So when we came in right downtown. Actually, the hotel, this was probably my favorite hotel that we stayed at the entire trip, which was the Surf Hotel, which is in the new like South Main Street area of Buena Vista. Really cool hotel. They have like, I don't know, it just kind of has a very like European kind of feel to it, the way that some of the rooms are set up. And yeah, that's kind of the route from technically Glenwood Springs, but Gypsum to Buena Vista. Probably my favorite section of the Colorado BDR. Super fun. It's a good mixture of like fast flowy roads with a big mountain pass over Hagerman that has a lot of technical features in it. So you kind of get just a really good mixture of everything. And it wasn't so hard that it was just like kind of a beatdown like the San Juan sections were. So today by far was my favorite section of the Colorado BDR. If you have made it this far, please hit the subscribe button. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. It helps the channel. You know, it does the whole YouTube algorithm thing. Leave a comment below. Have you ridden this section? What did you think of it? Did you enjoy it as much as I did? Definitely my favorite section. And it's not too far from where I live. So I think I'm going to go back and try to just do parts of the sections, that section again, because I could kind of build out like just a day trip to redo that loop. So leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all the YouTube stuff. And until next time, stay safe out there.